So get this, podcast listeners, MSNBC's Joy Reid rants about Republicans. That's right, MSNBC's Joy Reid rants about Republicans. Here's MSNBC Joy Reid's monologue just a couple of days ago about the Republican Party and Donald Trump. We have 3 clips on this. Here's the first of 3. Can't believe it.
President-elect Joe Biden will be confronted by not 1, but 2 viruses when he takes office in 42 days. The first, of course, being the pandemic, but the second virus is the more pernicious long-term threat to our country. The disease of anti-democracy derangement, infecting nearly the entire Republican Party. And not just Donald Trump. To the point that Republicans up and down the scale, from national political figures to local yokels, are joining in Trump's increasingly absurd and far-fetched last gasps at overturning the presidential election.
Can you believe that? So Joy Reid has decided to engage in, I guess, what is that? Identity politics? If you are a Republican, then you are, according to Joy Reid, a Trumper, and therefore you are anti-democracy. I mean, it's unbelievable that anyone would watch a channel so stupid. Namely, a channel that basically puts people in categories and one time after another talks about identity politics. It's so divisive. But podcast listeners, it gets worse with Joy Reid on this particular monologue. So how does it get worse? Well, she just turns into, I don't know, she turns everything into black, white. I don't understand what has happened to the media today. So here's Joy Reid again, speaking out about the disease of the anti-democracy derangement syndrome. What? I mean, I don't know. You have to listen to this. Here's the clip.
But this disease of anti-democracy derangement in Republicans is so virulent that even the 2 individuals who claim to represent or want to represent the people of Georgia, Senator David Perdue and the unelected Senator Kelly Loeffler, both sided with Texas, saying they fully support the lawsuit, even after Georgia's Republican Attorney General called it factually wrong.
So that's why she did this monologue then, right? Because Joy Reid's monologue is really about the races in Georgia, namely the 2 Senate races that are up for grabs in Georgia, because Joy Reid doesn't want the Republicans to control the United States Senate. And her biggest fear is that the Republicans are going to tighten up the election laws to require, I don't know, voter ID or other kinds of restrictions, by the way, that would actually make our elections safer and more reliable, and so that we can regain confidence in our elections. But that's not what Joy Reid wants, because really, her whole monologue, when you listen to this monologue, it initially starts out, Republicans bad, and then, oh, by the way, the Georgia Republicans are really bad because they support Donald Trump. And then we have a third clip where she says, well, it's not just Republicans are bad and the Georgia Republicans who are running for the United States Senate are bad, but in addition to that, the Republicans are anti-democratic. They don't want a democracy. They don't want fairness in voting. I mean, literally, Joy Reid is accusing Republicans of exactly what the DNC and the entire Democrat Party has engaged in all year long, which is to make our voting systems less secure by voting by mail. We have that third clip, and here it is.
Let's be clear. This isn't about fraud. Ken Paxton himself said as much. These Republicans are simply saying, in effect, they do not and will not accept that black voters should be allowed to cast votes, however legal those votes may be, to overrule the desires of a majority of white voters and tip elections that pick the president. Georgia Republicans made that very clear, outlining a plan to punish heavily black Fulton County and the Atlanta suburbs that delivered their state to Biden by restricting voting by mail and rolling back the election laws that contributed to the state's record turnout in November. If enacted, the new law would eliminate no-excuse absentee voting. It would add a voter ID requirement to mail ballots for voters with an eligible excuse and eliminate drop boxes. In short, let's make it really hard for those black voters and young voters and suburban Democrats to do this again.
So there you have it. Once again, Joy Reid is race baiting, right? It's typical MSNBC identity politics and race baiting, because the Democrat Party, ladies and gentlemen, is so terrified that Donald Trump and, equally important, the Republican Party and the conservative movement is getting more and more Black Americans and Hispanic Americans to join it and to vote for it, because that's the way so many people actually live their lives. But instead, she's race baiting, and she's saying, well, the reason why the Republicans in the legislature in Georgia want voter ID and they want to eliminate no excuse absentee balloting, which we'll explain in a minute, is because they don't want Black people in Fulton County, Georgia to vote. Are you kidding me? I mean, folks, are we saying that because of the color of your skin, that you are incapable of getting to the polls and voting like everybody else? I mean, that's what she's saying. Joy Reid, it doesn't make any sense. In fact, it's completely and utterly untrue. What is true is that voter ID is the only way to verify that the person voting is actually the person that is there in person voting. Duh. And then the other thing is no excuse absentee ballots is what has wreaked havoc across America. Because the idea that we can just mail out ballots to millions of people who didn't ask for them and then tell them, you know, hey, go ahead and vote absentee. There's no voter ID requirement that we need to verify that you're actually the one that cast that ballot. I mean, everybody knows, look, in my own household, and I've said this before in this podcast, in my own household, it's my wife and I who live there, and yet we got 4 ballots, right? We got 4 ballots. 4! So we could have, you know, requested with these absentee ballots, and God knows how many times we could have voted for other people. And how many times did that happen across America? This is the problem. But of course, if you're MSNBC's Joy Reid, you don't really want to talk about the real issues and explain it to the American people, because if you did that, you might actually have intelligent viewers. Instead, yes, that's right. If you watch MSNBC, you are a unique part of dumb. I'm sorry, you really are. Because instead, what she does, Joy Reid, is she plays the race card just like Stacey Abrams, playing that same old race card and trying to say, yep, they don't want you to, you know, like Joe Biden, they want to keep you in chains, they don't want you to vote. Ladies and gentlemen, the most important franchise that we have in the United States is the franchise of voting, and voting in person is what should be done because of the simple fact that that's the only way we can verify that it's you that voted. Everybody knows it. You know it. I know it. Every podcast listener knows it. Everybody, by the way, Joy Reid on MSNBC, she knows it too. She totally knows this. But she's trying to convince people, and she's drawing these lines of demarcation. And if you want to wonder why people are so, if you want to wonder why our country is so divided, if you ever wonder why our country has so many people that feel like we are living in a powder keg, it's because of the comments of MSNBC's Joy Reid and so many people on the left who are talking just like her, that are literally inciting, in my opinion, unrest. And that is so wrong. That is not the function of the media. It's also not the function of politicians. It's the function instead of informing. It's supposed to inform. It's supposed to bring people together. It's supposed to come to a consensus of why we want to make voting safer.